Hello, my name is Shirley Reeder. I am an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. I am interviewing James Hissom. The date is October 11th, 2006, and we are at the main library. Our camera operator today is Doug McKee, and also present is Mrs. Hissom. Mr. Hissom, I guess I'd like to start with a little background. Where you grew up and what you did before you went into the service?
I was born in St. Mary's, West Virginia, which is a little river town right along the Ohio. I've been an Ohio River rat all my life. The schools there were small. This is a small town, about 2,200 people. And I finished high school in 1941, right before the bombing. And the next year I enlisted in the Navy. I had no previous occupation, particularly outside of pickup jobs. I had worked in for a florist, and I had worked in the grocery store, but I had no actual employment, steady employment of any kind.
So you enlisted in the Navy, you weren't drafted or anything?
No, I enlisted in the fall of 1942.
And what did you go into in the Navy?
I was interested in becoming a band director, so I enlisted and was assigned to the Navy School of Music in Washington, D.C. That's the way they run things. You go take a physical examination. If you pass the physical, they'll give you a music test. If you pass the music test, they'll guarantee you'll be sent there after boot camp.
You had to go through boot camp though, like everyone else?
Yes, we went to boot camp. It's a shortened boot camp, really. You don't go as many weeks as the other guys. But I went to Norfolk. I was there for 5 weeks, and then was shipped back to Washington, D.C., arrived back there on December 7th, 42.
A year after Pearl Harbor. So what instrument did you play?
I played tuba, and I also play string bass. Tuba players normally double on string bass because you have to play in dance bands and concert bands.
Okay.
We normally have to play at least 2 instruments.
So after you went to the Navy School of Music, what was your assignment?
Beg pardon?
After you went to the Navy School of Music, what was your assignment?
Our first assignment was to go to Pearl Harbor to replace the band that was on Fort Island at that time. But when we got to San Francisco, our orders were changed. We were shipped up to Bremerton, Washington, and reported aboard the USS California, which at that time was being repaired and rebuilt.
Because the California was destroyed at Pearl Harbor, right?
California was one of the battleships that was sunk at Pearl Harbor. It was raised, towed back to Bremerton, stripped down. They stripped the whole superstructure off of it and put a new superstructure and had it ready to go again in early 44. The same guns were used on it, the same motors were used, but the outline of the ship, the silhouette of the ship was completely different because it was designed to look like a couple of other battleships which were more modern.
Like the Missouri, for example?
Not with that particular. It was the one we were told that it was most like was the South Dakota, which was an earlier group of ships than the earlier class of ships than Missouri. It wasn't nearly as large either. We were only about 620 feet long, and the newer ones were about 880, I think. There's quite a difference in length. We were really, when we went aboard, the ship wasn't even ready. We lived in barracks for a couple of months, and then reported to the board, and from there went through short shakedown on Puget Sound, and then we went down to Long Beach, right off of Long Beach, and spent about 8 weeks there on shakedown, going through all the various drills and so forth that we would have to use later on when we got into action.
Okay.
We were there 8 weeks, as I say, and then we were shipped to Pearl Harbor and spent a couple more weeks drilling, and then left Pearl Harbor in June of '44. We were assigned to cover troop landings on Saipan. The California was one of a group of older battleships that was mostly used for bombardment. It turned out later on we did other things too, but we were principally a bombardment fleet. We would start 3 days before a landing and bombard the island we were going into for 2 or 3 days. And then after the landing was made, we would stand off to the side of the island and bombard as necessary. We'd have call for fire. We had a plane that was launched from the ship that would report on how the things were going, where the shots were fired, were landing, and where we needed to fire. And we also got calls from people on the beach asking to cover a certain area. And that was basically what we did. After Saipan, we had about a month. We back on one of the islands further back, and were restocked and repaired, and returned to cover landings on Guam and Tinian, which are just south of Guam. On that, after that, we headed south. They were sending us down to Manus Island in the New Hebrides. And on our way down, we had the famous crossing the line ceremony.
Oh,
we
yeah.
were initiated to be shellbacks from being a plain old polygog. And shortly after that, at about 3:30 one morning, our sister ship, the Tennessee, had steering problems, rammed into our bow and tore about a 50-foot strip of steel off the ship. We were fortunate in that the men that were on the other side of that strip were on watch, and there was only 5 men lost in that collision. And when we got to Manus, we were immediately floated into a dry dock, which, when we went into it, looked like 2 rows of lights. But the next morning, we were setting up high and dry, completely out of the water. Because water is pumped out, and you're setting in a dry dock when you end up. That took a month or so to fix that. We went from there up to the Philippines, and we were at Leyte, and later on at Luzon. Shortly after we got into that, the ship was involved in what's called the Battle of the Saragasso Straits, which was the last major sea battle of World War II. We were credited, along with the other 5 battleships that were involved, in sinking 2 Japanese battleships, damaging a cruiser and some destroyers. There were other ships further down the strait that also damaged some of those ships as they came up. We were credited with sinking a battleship, but whether we did or not, it's hard to tell.
Wow.
And that's been changed about 4 times. But shortly after that, we were hit with a kamikaze plane. And it was one of those days when they just keep coming at you. They had shot down 2 of them during the day. And one of them finally got through. Managed to kill about 50 people back in our rear end of the ship. And after that, we were sent then back to the United States for repairs. And it was a rather fast change. The last night we were in Pearl Harbor before we went back to the States, I slept on top side with a suit dungarees on. 5 days later, we were in Bremerton wearing pea coats. It's a small change in temperature there.
Yeah, really.
And we were there for about six to 8 weeks. That was the place that in history, it was during the time that President Roosevelt died. And after that, we again went down to Long Beach for a short shakedown and then back out. We were taken out then to Okinawa. And, we always made a big joke out of that because the day after we got there, the Japanese surrendered formally. We figured all we had to do was to come into the harbor and they'd give up. Following that, we we were in a group that swept mines out of the South China Sea.
Oh.
They were sweeping a lane from the islands that we held to the coast of China. And the idea was to launch attack from China and from the islands at the same time when they went into Japan. And we were doing that, had been doing it for some time, and we went back to the Philippines for some rest and repairs, recreation. And while we were there, the first atomic bomb was dropped. And a couple of days later, they finally gave up. And to say that there was great rejoicing is kind of being restrained.
Really?
On that particular day, I remember a lot about it in that everybody else, except cooks and people on watch, had the day off. The band spent the day rehearsing for a show that night. Which was typical. A lot of times we had off when they were on and we were on when they were off. But following that, we were assigned to duty covering troop landings in southern Japan. There was a place called Wakadura 1. And we covered the landings there, and we were there for some time. And each day, a few of the crew got ashore to have a look around and to barter with natives, particularly sugar, soap, cigarettes. Our captain believed that every man who fought in the Pacific should see Tokyo. So, shortly, we were notified that we were going to Tokyo for a couple of days. We went up to Yokosuka Naval Base, and we were taken from there in smaller boats up to Tokyo. Of course, as far as seeing the city, what you saw was a lot of empty lots. It had been pretty well cleared out by that time with the firebombing and so forth. So we were there for a day and got a chance to see what the area was like. And came back to Wakanura, and there was a great debate going on as to what we should do. They wanted to put the ship in mothballs in Philadelphia. But as always, there were problems. The California, when it was rebuilt, was made about 20 feet wider than they had been, so it could no longer go through the Panama Canal. The other alternative, perhaps, would be the Suez Canal, except that we drew too much water. Suez Canal is evidently fairly shallow. So it was either go around to Cape of Good Hope or go around
Cape Horn.
Cape Horn, yeah. I should remember that, Horn, okay. Finally, it was decided we'd do a goodwill trip. And we ended up going to Singapore, spent about 3 or 4 days there. On to Colombo, Ceylon, spent 3 or 4 days there. And then to Cape Town, South Africa, and spent some time there. We finished up there, went straight across the Pacific Atlantic, and anchored in Philadelphia on December 7th, 1945. In the process, we had covered about 150,000 sea miles.
Wow.
In that we were aboard ship 26 months. And we had crossed the equator in 3 oceans. And of course, they crossed the 0 meridian.
Wow. So you saw a lot of the world there.
Got around the world. All courtesy Uncle Sam.
Well, there you go. Can't beat that. Could you give us a little idea of what the band does, Navy band, because I think this is something a lot of people are maybe unfamiliar with.
Yeah. The Navy School of Music turns out what are called unit bands. And for a long time, it was the chief in charge of 20 musicians. And they provide all the music that's necessary aboard ship. That means that you play for church service, or some of the group does at least. You have a dance band, which entertains the crew, and also plays for ship's dances and officers' dances. You have military honors to render when there are people come aboard, such as ambassadors and so forth. In any place that there's music needed, we have played for ball games and swimming meets, even horse shows. And any place you needed music, that is what we did. Usually, it was pretty much confined to your own ship. In our case, we had a group of people in charge who decided it was all right for the band to go off the ship and play. And we did a great deal of that. We had put together an hour show with our dance band. We had with us a fellow who was a xylophone soloist, had been on the Keith Vaudeville circuit for about 5 years before he came in service. We had a vocalist that we had recruited out of the crew who had sung around Hollywood, and our own various soloists on instruments that we had in the band. We had picked up a Marine sergeant who did our MC work. He was very good at it. I don't know what his background was, Incidentally, he won a Silver Star the day we got rammed with the plane. So he was a Marine too. The other thing that we do, any time you're in service, the first item on your agenda is always your military duties. You always have military duties, which come ahead of anything else. In our case, military duties included those honors for raising the flag in the morning and evening when you're aboard and so forth. But also, within the crew of the ship, you are required to do certain things. On the California, the captain decreed very early, everybody will stand watch. Some bands that was not the case, some ships you didn't. The band didn't do anything but play. But on the California, everybody stood watch. 20 out of the 20 people that we had in band, 12 of them were on lookout watch. And they had to go through training to recognize planes and ships and so forth. The other 8 were on what was called damage control. And this is a group that checks the ship, a section of the ship that they're assigned to hourly to be sure everything is all right, that there are no lights shining, no leaks on anything, and everything is in good shape. On general quarters, when the ship is going to actually go into action, you're assigned various things. In our case, the whole band was assigned to ammunition passing for 5-inch guns. A 5-inch gun fires a shell, which is, as they say, 5 inches, and I don't know, so long, weighs about 35 pounds. In behind that goes a powder section. You see occasionally these ashtrays that are made out of brass shells. That's probably a 5-inch shell. That's what the powder is in. It comes up on 2 hoists from the handling rooms down below decks. The shells come up on one, the projectiles come up on another. And they each have a process that has to be done. The shells have a brass or bronze tip that has to be unscrewed, taken off. The powder has to be taken out of a can, and both of them are passed through a hole in the bulkhead, which is called a scuttle, into a handling room, which is 1 deck below the gun. And this is kept there until it's needed up above. Then it's put on a hydraulic hoist, hoisted up into the gun mount itself, and there it's loaded into the gun and fired. We were rather proud of the 5-inch gun that we were on. The first day at Saipan, our gun captain came out with a big smile on his face. "What's going on?" He says, "We're confusing the Marines." And everybody, "Yay!" Well, it turned out that our 5-inch gun was picking off tanks on the beach. When they were firing, they were hitting the tanks. And what was happening, the Marines were coming down the road, and here this tank comes, and all of a sudden the tank explodes, and they can't figure out what's going on. When they found out what was going on, then they began to call for help.
Well, you mean it was Japanese tanks?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they should have been grateful, really.
There are some other things that you occasionally get. There are other drills aboard ship that you take part in case you need it. For instance, for a collision drill, which we didn't use when we collided with the Tennessee, they called us to general quarters rather than collision. So at that though we were supposed to be stretcher bearers in the sick bay.
Oh,
And there were some other ones too. There was, I think there was some abandoned ship drills and some other things of that type that they did drills in. They were hit very lightly. Might mention that a battleship was the safest place to be after Pearl Harbor. If you look at the history, after Pearl Harbor, there were no American battleships sunk.
that's right. Carrier was not the safest place to be.
Carriers were something else again. They were sitting ducks.
Right, because they wanted to hit the carriers.
But the battleship was a good place to be. We didn't realize it at the time, but as you look back at it, it turns out it's a pretty good place.
Now, what instrument or instruments did you play in the Navy band?
My major instrument was tuba, and I also played string bass. Since we played such things as concert band and honors and so forth, and we also played dance band, nearly everybody had to double on some instrument. If you were a clarinet player, you quite often usually played saxophone as a double. Trumpets and trombones didn't have to worry about it. They would play their own. In our case, the band I was in, there were two tuba players. The other tuba player took up guitar and played big band guitar. So we had, out of the 20 guys, I think only about 2 that didn't play in the dance band. Because one of the guys was a trumpet player, played piano, and a baritone player played trombone. We had almost everybody involved.
I'm just sort of curious, you were talking about a dance band, the ship was mostly men, wasn't it?
Yes.
How did you have these dances, I guess?
Well, when you're in the States, usually you have a ship's dance before you leave.
Right.
And some of the guys by that time have met girls that they invite, but there are also usually a couple of busloads of USO girls would come in. We had ship's dance both times that we were back in the States, and that's usually where they came. And the officers' dances, I don't know, I guess the embassy where we were.
Oh, okay, brought some girls in maybe.
That was before the days, the waves were around, but none of them were aboard ship. No way.
Okay. You mentioned that you were, I think, were you in Saipan when President Roosevelt died? Is that right? Saipan?
We were in Bremerton. That was when the ship was being repaired from the hit that we took out in the Philippines.
What was the feeling aboard ship when he passed away?
Well, the majority of the guys on there had practically never known any other president. It was just almost unbelief that would have happened. And we really didn't know that he was really in bad shape or how bad he was. Even though we had been in Washington, all of us had been in Washington for a year, we still had no idea that his health had gotten that bad.
Well, there wasn't television then or anything, so you didn't see the president on TV like you do now. So
You saw newsreels. You saw newsreels and movies and things, but you didn't have the instant coverage we have now.
Right.
That began to come in after the war. And incidentally, after the war, the band, I was in the band in Philadelphia then, and all we did was play. There were no military duties except for rendering honors and things like that.
But you were still in the service.
Oh, yeah. I had signed up for a full 6-year Navy hitch, and that was required to go into the School of Music because you got at least a year of training. And
Okay.
It's tit for tat. You do get one, you're gonna have to pay for it.
So you were stateside though, of course, after that?
Yes. My actual sea duty time was 26 months. I was in school for about a year, and I spent the last 34 months of my enlistment in Philadelphia. And that was the Philadelphia Naval Base, and we were attached to the 4th Naval District Commandant. And I expect at least 6 times while we were there, we were told we were going to move, and all they did was change the command. We never moved out of the yard, never changed bases. It's just one of those things.
Now, when you were aboard the California, you did see some action, it sounds like it.
Yeah, we bombarded 5 different islands, and we of course were in the sea battle, which not too many people were at that time. Early in the war, there was a number of sea battles, but by the time you got to 1945, that had calmed down. The Japanese Navy by that time was very, very inept. They didn't have much left. And after that Battle of Sargasso Straits, they had practically nothing left. We saw in the Yokosuka Naval Yard, when we were up there, we saw one battleship that they had left. And I don't think it was possible that they could have used it to fight with. It was a mess. It was they had just been reduced to practically nothing as a naval power.
But you were still involved in the pre-bombarding of
Yep.
the different landings.
That
continued.
That was the action
That
that we
was
had.
action.
We had came out pretty well on it. The first day as Saipan, we got a mortar hit up around the smokestack, which killed 1 man. And we didn't lose any other men until we were rammed. We lost 5 there. And then we didn't lose any more until the kamikaze hit us. We lost 50 there. So when we lost 50, 55 men, the total crew of the California was roughly the same as my hometown, about 2,200. Which is unusual that you get that many people in that space.
Well, when the Arizona went down, were there about 2,000 men who went down at the Arizona?
No, there were about 1,000. The 2,200 is the total.
Total, the other
killed
ships,
there.
okay.
I don't remember the exact number of Arizona. I have seen it, and I have been there, but I don't.
It was a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The band was all killed in Arizona.
Yes. Total.
Because I think when most of us think of Navy bands, we always think of those pictures the night before.
Yeah.
And then how sad it was that they were all killed.
We had, at the School of Music, we had an honor roll on the wall. And outside of that band, I think there were only about 6 more musicians that had been killed at that point, and that was during 42, 43. It turned out it was very safe because I don't think we lost anybody after that. I don't know of any particular that were.
So after the war, what did you do? Were you able to go to college on the GI Bill?
I was discharged 2 days late in Philadelphia, and 2 days later I was married, and About a month later, I started school at Ohio University. I got both a bachelor and a master's in music education. I started teaching, actually while I was still in school, I taught part-time. But I ended up teaching for 32 years in high schools. I spent 2 years part-time, and I spent 6 or 7 years in Jackson, Ohio, for handling all the musical, the instrumental music. And then I moved down to North College Hill, which is a suburb of Cincinnati, and I was there for 23 years. I retired in 1983. Since then, I have done no teaching at all, but I have played a great deal. I have, at the moment, play basically the band I'm with most is the American Legion Band in Green Hills, and I also play concerts with the Grotto Band and the Queen City Band here, and occasionally I sub with a brass quintet. I'm still active. I had to quit the string bass. I'm no longer able to play that. But the tuba is still usable, and I use it regularly.
Oh, that's great. The Green Hills Band is don't they play old dance music and all?
No, these are concert
They
bands.
do
Concert
okay.
bands.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to share with the future generations as far as what you learned from this period of your life? What you hope maybe to convey to them?
I think maybe the thing that I would most like them to know is that don't be in such a big hurry to go to college. I was out 7 years actually, before I went to college. It doesn't impair your ability to study or learn. I went back to college and finished with honors in the bachelor program and high honors in the graduate program. I found no drop off. I think that they would find that doing a little public service, either some of the things where you just go and work in other countries, or actual serving in the military is very worthwhile. For a lot of people, it settles them down to where they have a better idea of what they want to do. I figure that I really think that the Navy probably had more effect on me than anything else I did in my life. That was a period of 6 years out of over 80, so it can be pretty.
So you would say those are some of the most significant years in your life?
Yes, very. It's had an impact on practically everything I've done the rest of my life. And it's one of those things that you don't necessarily always enjoy all of it, but you remember the good times and forget the other.
What would you say you like the best?
Oh, the camaraderie. There's a feeling there of people in the service that regardless of where you go, you meet people that are also in service. You immediately have a common bond. And when you're in service, any place you go, the the people in the same service, immediately you have a bond with it. You don't have to take an hour and a half getting acquainted. When you meet, you're acquainted because you've been
Right.
through the similar items.
What would you say was the worst thing?
Well, I think I'm pretty fortunate. I didn't have to go through some of the things that people in the Army did. I know we used to, when we bombarded, we would bombard all day, but at night we pulled back away from the island, have a hot meal, go to bed or go and watch. And guys ashore couldn't do that. You used to really feel for them. I think maybe the worst times were the periods. In one case, we picked up survivors from 2 ships that had been sunk. And one of the, part of the crew had been sunk twice in one night. The ship had been sunk. They were picked up by another ship and it was sunk.
Oh my gosh.
And we picked up the guys, and a lot of them were burned badly. And also when we got hit, there were a lot of people, we were right next to one of the aid stations, and people, but that's the worst time.
But you're glad you went in.
Yes, I am, and I'm glad that I went where I did. It was a little different than some people had, but I consider it excellent preparation for what I did later. The things that I did in the service band were very, very beneficial later on. I got acquainted with a lot of music, a lot of things about music that I would probably never have done it even just going to college. I think it would, that was very worthwhile for me.
I think it probably was a tremendous morale booster for the men on the ship to be able to have music.
Yeah.
It's very good just for the soul.
We had a radio station aboard the ship, and one of the guys in the band ran it. And during meal hours particularly, and there's some other times during the day, there was a lot of records and all that were played, and a certain amount, but nothing beat live music. It's just better to have that. And we did our best to provide all that we could.
Well, I would like to thank you for being with us today. I've enjoyed talking to you.
My pleasure.